Fake seafood got you feeling crabby? Fear not! If you avoid these mistakes, you'll never need the real deal again. Since both imitation and real crab meat are associated with crabs, you might think they're interchangeable, but they're not. Fake crab meat is made of surimi, which is a Japanese term for ground meat. Some people even refer to surimi as the hot dog of the sea because so many ingredients go into making it. Just like hot dogs, surimi has its place in the world. However, it's ultimately very different in flavor, texture, content, and nutrition than real crab meat. Unless you live in a seaside town, you're probably well accustomed to seeing imitation crab meat on restaurant menus, and everything from seafood salad to crab casserole to sushi. Restaurants don't always highlight the fact that certain dishes contain imitation crab meat, however, which can be a problem if you're allergic to any of the ingredients typically found in surimi. The first rule of imitation crab meat, then, is to actually know when you're using it. Many people prefer to cook imitation crab meat. The truth is, though, this isn't really necessary. Imitation crab meat is much like that found in a hot dog. All the ingredients are cooked beforehand and molded into the shape you find in the package. The factory vacuum seals the meat into its package, which helps kill most of the bacteria. After sealing the meat in its packaging, the manufacturer pasteurizes it, a process that can kill off pathogens that could make you sick, just as long as you follow storage instructions and eat the meat before its expiration date. The FDA provides packaging requirements for imitation crab meat based on which type of pathogens the sealing and pasteurization process should kill. If the packaging indicates that you should keep it frozen, only thaw it in the refrigerator and only eat it immediately after thawing. As long as you follow those instructions, your imitation crab meat should be perfectly safe to eat cold. Of course, if you want to err on the side of caution, you can always cook it anyway.
Honey, what's for dinner?
Since imitation crab meat is made from pollock, it's easy to assume that it's just as healthy as real crab meat. However, pollock aren't nearly as nutrient-dense as crab meat, and since surimi is a processed food, it's often mixed in with other ingredients that aren't as nutrient-dense either. If you compare imitation crab to Alaskan king crab, you'll find they both share a similar amount of calories, phosphorus, and magnesium. But that's about where the similarities end. Take the vitamin content, for example. 3 ounces of real crab meat provides 408% of your daily vitamin B12, 111% of copper, 62% of selenium, and 55% of zinc. Meanwhile, imitation crab only provides 21% of vitamin B12, 3% of copper, 35% of selenium, and 3% of zinc. Surimi doesn't have any vitamin C or folate like real crab meat does, and it contains significantly fewer omega-3 fatty acids. Imitation crab may also include other ingredients like carrageenan, MSG, and phosphates, which many people try to avoid. On the positive side, though, surimi tends to get its pink color from carmine, paprika, or beet juice, so that classic coloring won't be doing you much harm. Notably, imitation crab tends to contain half as much sodium as real crab too, so it's not all bad. Since fish is good for a low-carb or ketogenic diet, it's easy to think that imitation crab might fall into the same category. While the calorie content of both real and fake crab meat are similar, the calories aren't at all equal. Around 80% of the calories in Alaska king crabs are derived from protein. Meanwhile, some 63% of the calories in surimi is made up of carbs. All those carbs in surimi are derived from the filler. Depending on the brand, you're likely to find wheat or corn mixed in with the meat. Potatoes or tapioca starch may also be featured on the ingredient list. These starches help make the surimi easier to freeze and add to its bulk so the company can sell it for less money. Pseudo crab meat also tends to contain sugar and sorbitol, a carb-laden sugar alcohol, to give it a sweetness like real crab and help it maintain texture during the freezing and thawing processes.
All right, everyone, chill.
Here's a good rule for imitation crab. Don't mess with the temperature. When the manufacturer cooks and packages the meat, it does so with flavor and texture in mind. So if you buy imitation crab meat from the refrigerated section of the store, it should stay refrigerated. And if you buy it from the frozen food aisle, you should keep it frozen. If you don't end up using your refrigerated meat before the expiration date on the package or buy a lot of packages on sale, it can be tempting to freeze it. But if you do, this is likely to change the meat's flavor and texture.
Very nice.
If you freeze refrigerated imitation crab meat, there are a few things you can do to cover up these changes, including allowing it to defrost in the fridge overnight. You won't notice the difference as much if you eat it in cooked dishes like crab casserole or crab cakes, rather than in uncooked dishes such as crab salads or sushi. Crab dip is also more forgiving of textural and flavor changes caused by unthawing. Not knowing how to heat and cook imitation crab meat is a mistake that can easily ruin your dish. The main thing to remember is that you only need to heat it long enough to warm it. If you heat it on the stovetop, you'll need a covered pan with a small amount of water or broth. Simply heat the meat on low long enough for the liquid and steam to warm up the meat. Steaming is another great way to heat imitation crab meat. 3 to 5 minutes should be enough to heat it through without overcooking. Unfortunately, using the microwave is more likely to change the texture than other reheating methods. It can help if you lower the power level to 50% and microwave it in 20-second segments until warm. If you're using any other cooking method, such as baking or sautéing, you'll want to only cook it as long as it takes to warm everything. So even with casseroles or hot crab dips, the minimal cooking time should only be as long as it takes to warm up all the ingredients. If you need to cook other ingredients longer, like in a stir fry, you'll want to cook everything else first and add the fake crab meat in the last few minutes. Otherwise, you risk overcooking it, leaving you with a dry, rubbery disaster. Be warned, just because you can safely eat crab doesn't mean you can definitely eat imitation crab. And imitation crab might not be safe to eat if you are allergic to crab. This is because imitation crab meat is actually made from a multitude of ingredients. According to US law, food packages are supposed to list food ingredients and declare if they contain common allergens. Unfortunately, one of the biggest reasons foods are recalled is because they fail to list allergens or disclose that they are processed in a factory that processes other foods with certain allergens. According to a 2023 study in the Journal of Food Protection, 34% of seafood recalls between 2002 and 2022 happened because the company failed to mention an allergen on the package. Usually, imitation crab meat is made from pollock. Some of the more expensive brands of imitation crab may even contain real crab. So people with shellfish allergies should check the label thoroughly to ensure that the ingredient list doesn't include crab or other types of shellfish. Often, the natural flavorings used in imitation crab can also contain shellfish. Imitation crab meat also tends to include starch, like wheat or corn, to help make it firmer. And to improve texture and appearance, it includes a protein, such as eggs or soy. Manufacturers use sugar to imitate crab's natural sweetness and help maintain its texture during freezing. Vegetable or fish oil, salt, stabilizing gums, red food coloring, glutamates, extra flavoring components, and preservatives may also turn up on the ingredient list. As with any food, if you have any type of allergies or food intolerances, it's always worth checking the ingredients. When it comes to imitation crab meat, it's important to notice where you bought it in the store, how it's packaged, and the writing on the label. There's a big difference between refrigerated and frozen, as well as between loose and vacuum-sealed packaging. Importantly, different types of imitation crab meat will have different shelf lives. If your refrigerated surimi comes pasteurized and in a vacuum-sealed package, you can expect it to last for a couple of months, or until the use-by or sell-by date on the package. If you don't eat it before the package date, you'll want to freeze it. However, once you open the package, you've got about 3 days until it needs to be thrown away.
Tick-tock.
Tick-tock indeed.
If your refrigerated surimi isn't vacuum sealed, you should treat it like regular fish and use it within 3 days of purchase or by the use-by date on the package. If you buy your imitation crab frozen, it should stay good in the freezer for quite a while. However, the quality will start to degrade after 10 to 12 months. You may notice a best buy date on a frozen surimi package, but it's almost certainly a quality guideline rather than a food safety guideline. You should never eat imitation crab if it has spoiled. Luckily, it's easy to tell when it has gone off. Obviously, you shouldn't eat your fake crab if the texture is slimy or the taste is sour, but you can also tell from the smell. Surimi tends to have a very mild smell when it is fresh, but if it's unsafe to eat, it will likely begin to smell fishy. When the pollock in your surimi is alive, the trimethylamine N oxide the fish contains helps it maintain the right balance of salt water in its cells. However, after the pollock dies, some chemical changes take place inside the fish. Enzymes and bacteria growing on the pollock change the TMAO into another chemical, trimethylamine. It's the TMA that smells so fishy, and this smell intensifies with time. Pasteurization and vacuum sealing can prevent bacterial growth, but after it is exposed to the air, the bacteria begins to grow again. So if you open up a package of new surimi and it already smells fishy in an off-putting way, it has been compromised somewhere along the way and won't be safe to eat. We often make the mistake of not thinking about the effects our seafood habits might have on the environment. We know overfishing isn't necessarily a problem when it comes to imitation crab. Pollock isn't being overfished in the Northwest Atlantic region, although it's less clear whether pollock in the Canadian Maritimes, Bogoslav, or the southeast Gulf of Alaska are being overfished or not. Regardless, pollock fishermen often end up finding overfished or endangered animals tangled in their fishing equipment. Unfortunately, animal fishermen have been known to accidentally hurt or kill endangered North Atlantic whales while fishing for pollock. It's especially detrimental to other aquatic life when pollock fishermen drag their nets along the sea floor, rather than using safer fishing methods. Beyond the potential for overfishing and endangering other sea life, the surimi washing process can involve a number of environmental repercussions. Surimi manufacturers wash the ground pollock repeatedly to improve the fish's smell and appearance, a process that gives the fish the right texture. Unfortunately, all this washing produces an excess amount of chunky wastewater, which needs to be treated before being pumped back into the ocean. There are worse foods to eat, of course, but it's still worth knowing the impact imitation crab can have on the planet before you pick up your next packet.